relate to us some of your experiences, what this reminded you of.
Well, Jerry, this particular clip caught my attention because first, I think this mother is so eloquent, and secondly, because Matthew's story is my story. Mm-hmm. As I said, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia in 2002, and it sort of rose and fell. I had good times and bad times and whatnot with it, times when I was very, very ill, times where it kind of relapsed and remitted a bit like multiple sclerosis. But eventually in 2008, I collapsed 6 years after the fibromyalgia diagnosis, and it wasn't long after that I was also diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome or myalgic encephalomyelitis, ME as I prefer to call it. Like Matthew, I'm often too sick to participate in things, and even when I agreed to take part in this, we didn't know whether I would make it. And we're still almost 20 minutes to go to the end of this show, and I could collapse at any time. Some of the things that they talked about, he talked about losing his ability to do math. I took a statistics course at university in about 1995, got an A in it. Today, I struggle to balance my checkbook. Like Matthew, if somebody asks me to make a decision, I often can't. Or if I do make a decision, it will trigger a post-exertional collapse because the exertion of making the decision was too much, and I have to go either back to bed or I fall down. Many times, Jerry, you've had to feed and dress me for medical appointments, and I know that you had to learn how to cook under some duress, something you didn't really want to do.
Still under duress, but I've done some smashing things as a result of this.
You make the best Greek salad in the world, and I apologize to the Greek restaurants, but it's true, he does. And for some reason, that salad gives me a little boost, whether it's all the nice phytonutrients. Food is such a big deal for us. We have to eat fresh, the packaged food. Certainly things with MSG in them are just completely out. They will make us crash for 2 or 3 days.
Well, I'm
so
convinced
fresh is best, and DeMille's, what they're doing is what we have to do.
The whole of the shoe swap is ripe for all of us. That's one of the things that's so important. We have been in touch with an awful lot of people suffering from these diseases. Not all of them, by any stretch of the imagination, are eating well, and many, I think, are suffering worse because of it. I think if anybody has a suspicion that they have one of these debilitating diseases, if they haven't been eating really well before, they've got to do that now. And if there's a healthy husband in the household with a wife, or one spouse is healthy and the other isn't, and we see some of this decline, you've got to take action here and just say, we're going to eat better, we're going to do well.
Well, you do have to, and you have to filter your water and do whatever you can, because until the doctors medical science figures out what causes this, we don't know. We just know there's some unknown assailant affecting our bodies. And so we have to give our bodies whatever ammunition they have to fight it. Because even if there's a drug that comes along to kind of take the load off, in the end it's the body that will do the healing. And so we just have to give our bodies as much to work with as they can in the way of fresh whole food. I would avoid crazy diets of any kind. I would be looking at 6 to 8 fresh vegetables a day, 1 or 2 fruits, probably not much more because of the sugar in fruits. It's healthy food, but it's still sugary. So I would avoid that. Grains can be tricky for people. Sometimes people do fine with them. Sometimes the starch, which turns to sugar, makes people sick. Many people try vegetarian diets. I was told once I was an obligatory carnivore, whether I want to eat meat or not. I have to, and I have to say that if I have animal protein, goat feta is particularly good. Free-range eggs are wonderful. Grass-fed animals, free-range chickens. Fish from the cold, deep ocean is perfect for me, and I feel a little bit better for a while. But people who are eating packaged or purchased food, I think that they're maybe not giving their bodies everything that they could have to fight it. Plus, they may also be adding to the toxic load that their bodies are already fighting, so it becomes an even more difficult situation.
Right. Carol,
So-
you started out your discussion about food by saying it's our body that does the healing. I want to underline that for everybody. We tend to go to doctors for cures. Doctors don't give cures. They give medicine, they mend bones, they do various things. They don't even heal the bones that they mend. They just put them together and then turn it over to our body. It's always, 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 always our bodies that do the healing. And so it just makes the simplest bloody sense that you've got to give your body what it was built to require to do its own healing.
Yeah,
That's really important. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you raised the issues about food.
Yeah, no, I think it's really, really important to have that. And that's not to say that the doctors can't help, because I'll tell you, when I had that fibromyalgia pain, I'd have taken anything. It was horrendous. And I don't know how people stand it. My hat is off to the people with fibromyalgia who still are in that pain, because a hug hurts. They feel like their ribs are broken. They feel like their joints are broken. And my hat is off to all of them.
And as you said to the doctors, what you're doing when you are eating well and doing all the things that your body wants to do to be in good nick all the time, even when it's sick, it wants to be in good shape. When you are doing that for yourself, you're also doing it to support your doctor, because the medications that your doctor gives you need the healthiest body possible to make those drugs work. So it isn't an option to eat well. It's absolutely essential.
Well, it is. And one of the doctors who I saw on this long journey, and there have been many, said to me that she was stunned that I was able to walk into her office. And I attribute it to the nutritional foundation that I had going in, and the nutritional foundation that I maintained in both food and food supplements. Just as a little aside, as we're talking about food and food supplements, I will say that sometimes glutathione is recommended for fatiguing illnesses. It can be counterproductive with ME/CFS patients. It may or may not work, but be prepared for a very bad crash if it doesn't work. And I would go at it very, very slowly, which is kind of the mantra for ME/CFS. Start low, go slow.
Carol, we're already starting to run out of time, and I have pages of notes. You have pages of notes. We're not going to get there. As I look at this, there's 4 things, 25 things I want to talk about. But one of them right now is exercise, because there's such a great deal of confusion, and I think bad information for patients of fibromyalgia and ME. And that's the advice they get about exercise. Can you please talk about that and help people a bit? Keep it fairly short.
Sure. When I first became ill with fibromyalgia, our idea was keep moving, keep walking, keep pushing, and we did that. And for fibromyalgia, that can sometimes work. But if you also have ME/CFS, exercise can be a real problem, because the aerobic system is broken. It's not deconditioned, it's broken, which means it doesn't work. So it is only your anaerobic system that you're working on, which I think gives you about 1/18 of the energy, if I remember the numbers correctly, that you would have if you're working in the aerobic system. You have about 18 times more energy as the anaerobic. So the anaerobic system will maybe give you 30 to 90 seconds of energy. And then you're trying to work in the aerobic system, which is broken. My test for someone who has expertise in ME/CFS is quite simple. I say to them very innocently, what's your view of exercise? How much do you think I should be doing? And anybody who tells me that I should go for a brisk walk for half an hour, I know they haven't read the ME/CFS research. If they tell me even to go for 15 minutes, I know they haven't read the research. If they say to me, start with about 30 seconds of something like very light weight training, which works with the anaerobic system, if they say start with 30 seconds and then move up by about 10% every 2 weeks, I know they know what they're talking about. But aerobic exercise like walking, like cycling, etc., will not work, because that system is broken. You've got to be doing anaerobic exercise in very, very small bursts, preferably lying down if you can. Yoga is a very good place to start. Start with yoga. Then when you're
Gentle
ready,
yoga.
very gentle yoga, absolutely. Take rests between using restorative yoga practice. Then, if you can, go into some very, very light weights, very short duration, and then aerobic exercise, if at all, would be the very last thing.
Now, combine all this knowledge that you've just imparted to us. It's been 13 years that you've been suffering from these diseases. And you are yourself a fine researcher, and you've had to dig and dig and dig. One of the disabilities that these two children had, that we heard about from the mother, was cognitive impairment. And that's such an irony, because the patient has to know her stuff or his stuff, usually her stuff, but is impaired. This points to a number of things. One, the need for a doctor who knows his stuff or her stuff, but also a spouse who's able to help out with that.
Yeah.
That's why this disease is a we disease.
Well, it is. And it could be a spouse. It could be a sister. I got the best sister in the world. Sorry
You
out
do.
there, everybody, but I do. She's been just tremendous in helping us with research and ideas. I have a cousin in California doing the same. They've just been tremendous. So it doesn't necessarily have to fall on the patient, but it has to fall on somebody who cares.
And I want to
I
point
have a
to
goddaughter, in Alberta, and her husband, who have brought information to me that was life-changing. So it doesn't have to fall on the
You've
patient.
been very lucky in a lot of ways with the people, but you've also contributed to that, because one of the things that you need to do with the people who want to support you is tell them how to support you. Because this is not your normal disease. They can support me when I have a cold. So can my employer. Take the day off, Jer. But they don't know how to support me otherwise. So the burden comes back on the patient to help others learn how to be of assistance. And this is why patients like this, including those two boys, had such troubles and have a difficult future ahead of them in spite of having a wonderful mother and father. The family suffers. Spouses have difficulties. I think a huge percentage of men leave their wives with these diseases. It's a shocking number. Friends just fade away because you can't participate with them anymore. It's kind of not their fault. And they aren't doing the research, and they don't know what's going on. And for somebody who's not in your position or that mother's position to be able to do the work and articulate it, the research work, you can't share that with friends. So you lose friends. Your employer doesn't understand. You're just sick all the time. And he's annoyed, or they're annoyed. Insurance companies don't really understand. Can you give me a quick statement about insurance companies? Because that people face that right away when they get sick and can't go back to work.
Well, they do, and it can be a very, very long road for people if their insurance coverage is denied, which happens pretty much the first time and the second time, almost without exception. And so people need to keep pushing. Sometimes they have to hire a lawyer to help them. Sometimes they have to write letters. In our case, you wrote a very compelling letter to the insurance company saying, I think you wouldn't have denied my wife if you'd known what's going on in our house. Here's what's happening. And you described 24 hours in our life, which was just at that time hair-raising in 2009, shortly after I collapsed. But Sun Life has been wonderful. I have to say that insurance companies are often maligned, but they were the ones who got me the most MECFS doctor that I've met, and he said I would never return to work, which was kind of crushing for me, but at the same time was helpful with insurance disability claim, which I will lose at age 65.
That's right. There comes an end to that kind of support. I'm just going to take another little break, and I'd like you to catch your breath and don't collapse. Just stay right there. You'll have time to talk about one more issue, maybe that was identified by the mother about her two boys. So let me speak about my sponsor. We'll come back and we'll hear your bottom line, perhaps. In all this dark news about diseases and a difficult world out there, I want you to remember to not overlook the fun stuff at DeMills. They have store specialties and gourmet products. DeMille's carries a fine selection of specialty products from local producers. The list goes on, it really does. And DeMille's doesn't stop there. For those of you wondering what to serve for dinner, go to DeMille's. DeMille's offers a range of easy dinner solutions, including pierogies, cordon bleu, a huge assortment of frozen seafood, all natural local chicken, and DeMille's very own natural beef. I'll say it again. History tells us if it's grown locally, DeMille's will have it fresh for you. And now I'm coming back to Carol. I want to say just before you begin, I want to say on your behalf, hello to Carrie in Seattle and Warren, her spouse. And I want to say hello to my niece in Toronto. I'm just showing off that we here at Voice of the Shoe Swap have listeners across the country and at least across 2 countries. And I know there's more of you out there. Thank you for being with us today. Carol?
Well, Jerry, I think maybe just to finish this off, because as you say, it has sounded pretty dark, but there is maybe a little light at the end of the tunnel, and I would like to just talk about resources that are available to people. As I mentioned, 600 studies in fibromyalgia were undertaken last year. That's a direct result of funding and the fact that the drug companies have now realized that, with over 1 million Canadians and probably 10 million in the US with this illness, there may be some money to be made. And that sounds kind of cynical, but the drug companies have to survive too. So anyway, they're looking for a cure. The Canadian Institutes of Health Research invested more than $198 million last year for ME/CFS research. That's an enormous increase from $33 million invested in the previous 6 years, which would have averaged just a little over $5 million a year. Well, last year alone, Shiseido paid almost $5 million to research male pattern baldness. I just kind of think these are a little more serious. I don't know. Anyway, $198 million coming from the Canadian Institutes of Health, and the Institutes of Medicine in the United States have put $1 million into studying the diagnostic and research criteria for ME/CFS and to review the change of name, as we've mentioned. I'd also want to say, though, that there's been a huge outcry about that because $1 million represents 20% of the annual budget in the USA for ME/CFS research, and the patient groups think that the money could be better spent because there are criteria. They're called the Canadian Consensus Criteria, and there have been international calls for the Canadian Consensus Criteria, or CCC, to be adopted as the criteria for diagnosis and for research. Also on that committee, about 50 internationally renowned ME/CFS specialists objected to that committee because there was no ME/CFS specialist on it, which is almost, I think, unheard of as far as I understand it, that a committee would be struck to come up with diagnostic criteria and there's no specialist in the disease on the committee. Treatments that are available, as we know, there is nothing specific yet, but the Canadian Consensus Criteria, you can Google that, or the International Consensus Criteria for ME/CFS is a primer, or the 2012 Canadian Guidelines for Diagnosis and Management of Fibromyalgia are all excellent, and they describe treatment and symptoms in very, very good detail. So just download them and take them to your doctor.
Carol, I'm going to have to stop you there because I know you have more, and so do I. I wanted to say something about male pattern baldness, but for those of you who know me, you'll know why. I want to say 2 things here as we go. Spouses, pay attention to your partner. Every indication of fibromyalgia and CFS that I know about is a sliding action, as the mother described about the 2 boys, and it was for Carol too. Something happens and you slide down. Watch for the patterns. Meanwhile, though, thank you, Carol, for coming in with me. I hope you don't suffer too much over the next 2 days. That's the nature of this disease.
Thank you for having me, and hello to everybody in my online support group.
Yes, you've got a huge one. And I'll remind everybody, please email me at dj@voiceoftheshoeswap.ca, and that's Voice of the Shoe Swap, all one word, and we will send you what resource information that we have for you that we couldn't share with you here on the radio. Thank you all. Take care.